Detective Marcus Sullivan walked into the Millbrook police station like he owned the place. At 6 feet tall with broad shoulders, he filled his uniform in a way that made people step aside when he passed. His badge gleamed on his chest, polished to perfection every morning. Marcus had been wearing that badge for 15 long years, and in that time, he had never lost a single case in court. The morning sun streamed through the station windows as Marcus poured himself coffee from the break room. The other officers nodded respectfully when they saw him. Some called him detective, while others simply said, "Sir." Nobody called him Marcus unless he gave them permission first. That was just how things worked in Millbrook. Marcus liked it that way. He had built his reputation one arrest at a time, one court case at a time, one conviction at a time. The people of Millbrook knew his name, they knew his face. Most importantly, they knew not to cross him. The small town of Millbrook had only 12,000 people, but it felt even smaller when Marcus was around. He knew everyone's business. He knew which teenagers were getting into trouble before their parents did. He knew which marriages were falling apart before the couples filed for divorce. He knew which shop owners were cutting corners on their taxes. Information was power, and Marcus collected information like other people collected stamps. His desk sat in the corner of the detective bureau, positioned so he could see everyone who came and went. 3 filing cabinets stood behind his chair, filled with case files that told the story of his perfect record. Marcus often looked at those files and smiled. Each one represented another criminal behind bars, another case closed, another victory for justice. Or at least, that's how Marcus saw it. The truth was more complicated, but Marcus had convinced himself long ago that complicated truths were for other people to worry about. His job was simple: catch the bad guys and make sure they went to prison. Everything else was just paperwork and politics. Marcus picked up his coffee mug and walked to his desk. The mug was a gift from the mayor 3 years ago. It had the town seal on one side and the words "Millbrook's Finest" on the other. Marcus drank from it every morning, a small ritual that reminded him of his place in the town's hierarchy. His computer screen showed his schedule for the day: 3 meetings with prosecutors, 2 witness interviews, and 1 court appearance in the afternoon. It was a typical Tuesday, the kind of day Marcus could handle with his eyes closed. He had been doing this job for so long that it felt automatic now. The phone on his desk rang. Marcus answered without looking at the caller ID. "Sullivan." "Detective, this is Janet from the courthouse," came the voice on the other end. "Just wanted to confirm you'll be testifying in the Washington case this afternoon." "Of course," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. "Same as always." "Great. Judge Williams is presiding. She's new, transferred from the state capitol last month." Marcus paused. He didn't like changes in his routine. New judges meant new personalities to figure out, new ways of doing things. But he wasn't worried. Judges were judges, and Marcus had dealt with dozens of them over the years. They all respected his experience and his track record. "No problem," he said. "I'll be ready." After hanging up, Marcus opened the Washington case file. Jerome Washington, 30 years old, arrested for drug possession 3 months ago. Marcus remembered the arrest clearly. It had been a routine traffic stop that turned into something more when Marcus decided to search the vehicle. The cocaine he found was enough to put Washington away for several years. The case was straightforward, like most of Marcus's cases. He would testify about the traffic stop, explain how he found the drugs, and watch as another criminal got what he deserved. The defense attorney was someone Marcus had never heard of, which was usually a good sign. New lawyers rarely gave him trouble. Marcus closed the file and finished his coffee. He had 2 hours before he needed to be in court, plenty of time to prepare. Not that he needed much preparation. After 15 years of testifying, Marcus could tell his story in his sleep. He walked over to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His uniform was pressed and clean. His shoes were shined. His hair was combed neatly to the side with just a touch of gray at the temples that made him look distinguished. Marcus liked what he saw. He looked like a cop who knew what he was doing, a cop who commanded respect. The reflection staring back at him was the face of authority in Millbrook. When people saw that face, they knew they were looking at 15 years of experience, 15 years of successful police work, 15 years of putting criminals where they belonged. Marcus straightened his tie and practiced his testimony one more time. "I observed the defendant's vehicle weaving between lanes," he said to his reflection. "I initiated a traffic stop for suspected impaired driving. During my interaction with the defendant, I detected the odor of marijuana. I asked for permission to search the vehicle, which was granted." The words came easily. Marcus had said them hundreds of times before, in dozens of different cases. The details changed, but the basic story was always the same. He was a good cop doing his job, keeping the community safe from people who broke the law. Walking back to his desk, Marcus noticed some of the younger officers watching him. They looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear that Marcus found satisfying. These rookies understood the hierarchy. They knew that Marcus was at the top of the food chain in this department. Captain Rodriguez waved at Marcus from across the room. "Good luck in court today, Sullivan." "Thanks, Cap," Marcus replied with a confident smile. "Should be another easy one." That confidence had carried Marcus through his entire career. He had never doubted himself, never questioned his methods, never wondered if maybe he was wrong about something. Doubt was weakness, and Marcus Sullivan was not weak. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 a.m. Marcus gathered his files and headed for the door. In a few hours, he would be sitting in a witness chair, telling his story to another judge, watching another criminal get convicted. It was just another day in the life of Millbrook's most successful detective. As Marcus walked toward his patrol car, he felt the familiar surge of power that came with wearing the badge. He was Detective Marcus Sullivan, and in this town that meant something. It meant respect, it meant authority. It meant never having to say you were wrong. Marcus had no way of knowing that this ordinary Tuesday afternoon would be different from all the others. He had no idea that his perfect record was about to come crashing down around him. He couldn't see that his unshakable confidence was actually his greatest weakness. All Marcus knew was that he felt invincible, untouchable, and completely in control of his destiny. In just a few hours, he would learn how wrong he could be. Marcus arrived at the courthouse at 1:15 p.m., 15 minutes before his scheduled testimony. He parked in his usual spot, the one reserved for law enforcement, and grabbed his case file from the passenger seat. The October sun felt warm on his face as he walked up the stone steps of the Millbrook County Courthouse. The building was over 50 years old, with tall columns and heavy wooden doors that creaked when they opened. Marcus had walked through those doors hundreds of times. The security guards knew him by name. The clerks smiled and waved when they saw him coming. Even the janitor nodded respectfully as Marcus passed by. But today felt different somehow. The courthouse was busier than usual for a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus noticed more people in the hallways, more conversations happening in hushed tones. He wondered what was going on, but he didn't worry about it. Whatever it was, it had nothing to do with his case. Marcus found courtroom number 3 and looked through the small window in the door. The room was fuller than he expected. Usually, drug possession cases only attracted a few family members and maybe a curious law student. Today, he counted at least 20 people sitting in the gallery. Jerome Washington sat at the defense table with his lawyer. Marcus had seen Jerome's file, so he knew the basic facts. 30 years old, worked at a local warehouse during the day and cleaned offices at night. No serious criminal record, just a couple of traffic tickets. Jerome looked nervous, fidgeting, with his hands and whispering to his attorney. The defense attorney was someone Marcus didn't recognize. Her name was Sarah Chen, according to the court documents. She was Asian, probably in her 30s, wearing a dark blue suit that looked expensive. She had papers spread all over the defense table and was writing notes in a leather notebook. Marcus frowned. Most defendants in Millbrook used the public defender, a tired old man named Bob Fletcher who rarely put up much of a fight. Private attorneys usually meant trouble. They asked more questions, filed more motions, and generally made Marcus's job harder than it needed to be. Still, Marcus wasn't too worried. Private attorney or not, the facts were the facts. He had found cocaine in Jerome Washington's car. The drugs were tested and confirmed. The chain of evidence was solid. Case closed. Marcus entered the courtroom and took a seat in the front row, behind the prosecutor's table. District Attorney Mike Thompson nodded at him. Mike was a friend, someone Marcus had worked with for over 10 years. They had put a lot of criminals behind bars together. "How's it looking, Mike?" Marcus asked quietly. "Should be straightforward," Mike replied. "Defense attorney has been asking for a lot of documents, but I don't see anything that changes the basic facts of the case." Marcus looked around the courtroom again. Jerome's family sat in the second row. An older woman who looked like his mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. A younger woman, probably his sister, held her hand. Several other people who looked like family members or friends filled the nearby seats. Behind them sat community members that Marcus recognized from around town. Mrs. Johnson from the grocery store, Pastor Williams from the Baptist church, a few teachers from the high school. Marcus wondered why so many people cared about a simple drug case. At exactly 1:30 p.m., the bailiff stood up. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams." Judge Williams entered from a door behind the bench. She was a black woman in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Marcus had never appeared before her, but he had heard. She was fair and professional. She had moved to Millbrook from the state capital, where she had handled much bigger cases than anything they saw in this small town. "Please be seated," Judge Williams said. "We're here for the case of State versus Jerome Washington. Is the prosecution ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mike Thompson replied. "Is the defense ready?" Sarah Chen stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Mr. Thompson, please call your first witness." The state calls Detective Marcus Sullivan. Marcus stood up and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held out a Bible, and Marcus placed his left hand on it while raising his right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Marcus said firmly. He settled into the witness chair and looked out at the courtroom. This was his stage, his moment to shine. He had sat in this same chair dozens of times before, always with the same result. The jury or judge would listen to his testimony, believe his story, and convict the defendant. Mike Thompson approached the witness stand with a friendly smile. "Detective Sullivan, please state your name and occupation for the record." "Marcus Sullivan, I'm a detective with the Millbrook Police Department." "How long have you been with the department?" 15 years. "And how many times have you testified?" "In court?" "I'd estimate around 200 times. Have you ever had a case overturned due to problems with your testimony or evidence handling?" Marcus straightened his shoulders. "No. Never." Mike nodded approvingly. This was the routine they had performed many times before. Establish Marcus's credibility, walk through the facts of the case, let the defense attorney ask a few harmless questions, and move on to conviction. "Detective Sullivan, I want to direct your attention to the evening of July 15th of this year. Were you on duty that night?" "Yes, I was." "And did you have occasion to make a traffic stop that evening?" "I did. At approximately 9:45 p.m., I observed a vehicle traveling southbound on Main Street. The vehicle was weaving slightly between lanes, so I initiated a traffic stop to investigate possible impaired driving." Marcus told his story with practiced ease. He described pulling Jerome over, approaching the vehicle, detecting the smell of marijuana, and asking for permission to search the car. He explained how he found a small bag of white powder hidden under the driver's seat, how he tested it with a field kit, and how it came back positive for cocaine. The story flowed smoothly, just like it always did. Marcus glanced at the jury, but remembered this was a bench trial. Judge Williams would be making the decision, not a jury. He looked at her face, trying to read her expression, but she maintained a neutral poker face. After 20 minutes of testimony, Mike Thompson finished his questions. "Thank you, Detective Sullivan. No further questions." Judge Williams looked at the defense table. "Ms. Chen, do you have questions for this witness?" Sarah Chen stood up slowly. She picked up her leather notebook and approached the witness stand. Marcus noticed that she moved with confidence, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Yes, Your Honor. I have quite a few questions. Something in her tone made Marcus sit up a little straighter. This wasn't going to be the usual softball cross-examination he was used to. Sarah Chen looked like she was ready for a fight. Marcus glanced around the courtroom one more time. All those people were watching him, waiting to see what would happen next. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a tiny flutter of nervousness in his stomach, but he pushed the feeling away. He was Detective Marcus Sullivan. He had never lost a case. He wasn't about to start now. Sarah Chen held her notebook in one hand and a pen in the other. She looked at Marcus with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. Marcus had faced many defense attorneys over the years, but something about this woman made him feel uncomfortable. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't nervous, she looked like she had all the time in the world. Detective Sullivan, Sarah began, her voice calm and professional. You testified that you stopped Mr. Washington's vehicle because it was weaving between lanes, is that correct? Yes, that's correct, Marcus replied. This was an easy question. He relaxed a little in his chair. And what time did this traffic stop occur? Approximately 9:45 p.m. Sarah looked down at her notes. In your police report, you wrote that the stop occurred at 9:45 p.m. But the dispatch log shows you radioed in the stop at 9:52 p.m. Can you explain this 7-minute difference? Marcus felt a small knot form in his stomach. He hadn't expected her to have the dispatch logs. Most defense attorneys never bothered to get those records. Well, times can vary slightly, Marcus said. I might have rounded down to the nearest 5-minute mark when I wrote my report. I see. So the actual time was closer to 9:52 p.m.? Possibly. Sarah made a note in her book. Detective Sullivan, you also testified that you detected the smell of marijuana when you approached Mr. Washington's vehicle. Is that correct? Yes. And this smell gave you probable cause to search the vehicle? That's right. But you didn't find any marijuana in the car, did you? Marcus shifted slightly in his seat. No, but the smell was still there. Sometimes people smoke marijuana and then throw it away before police arrive. I see. So you're saying Mr. Washington smoked marijuana, threw it away, but somehow the smell was still strong enough for you to detect it through his car window? Objection, Mike Thompson called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Williams said. Ms. Chen, please rephrase your question. Sarah nodded. Detective Sullivan, in your 15 years of experience, have you ever been wrong about detecting the smell of marijuana? Marcus thought about this carefully. It was a trap question, and he knew it. If he said no, he would look arrogant. If he said yes, it would undermine his credibility. I'm very experienced in detecting various odors related to drug use, he said finally. That's not what I asked. Have you ever been wrong? Marcus felt heat rising in his face. I suppose it's possible, but very unlikely. Sarah turned a page in her notebook. Let's talk about the search itself. You testified that you found cocaine under the driver's seat. How exactly did you find it? I conducted a systematic search of the vehicle. I checked the glove compartment, under the seats, in the door panels, and other common hiding places. And the cocaine was in a small plastic bag? Yes. Was the bag hidden, or was it in plain sight once you looked under the seat? Marcus hesitated. He remembered the arrest clearly, but some of the details were fuzzy. It had been just another routine bust to him at the time. It was tucked up under the seat frame, he said. So someone would have had to really look for it. To find it? Yes. Detective Sullivan, did you take any photographs of where you found the drugs? Another uncomfortable question. Marcus had gotten lazy about photographs over the years. Most cases never went to trial, and when they did, nobody ever asked about photos. No, I didn't take photographs. Did you have another officer witness the discovery of the drugs? No, I was working alone that night. Sarah made more notes. The courtroom was completely quiet, except for the scratching of her pen on paper. Marcus looked out at the audience and saw Jerome's family watching intently. He saw the community members leaning forward, hanging on every word. In the back row, Marcus noticed an older black man in an expensive suit. The man was probably in his 60s with gray hair and a distinguished appearance. He was taking notes in a small notebook, just like Sarah Chen. Marcus wondered who he was and why he cared so much about this case. "Detective Sullivan," Sarah continued, "let's talk about the field test you performed on the white powder. You used a presumptive test kit, correct?" "Yes." "And the test came back positive for cocaine?" "That's right. But you understand that presumptive tests can sometimes give false positives? They're very reliable when used properly. But they can give false positives?" Marcus gritted his teeth. "It's possible, but unlikely when the test is performed correctly. Did you send the substance to the state crime lab for confirmation?" "Of course. That's standard procedure." Sarah flipped through several pages in her notebook. "According to the lab report, the substance tested positive for cocaine. But the report also shows that only 0.8 grams were submitted for testing. Do you recall how much powder you originally found?" Marcus thought back to that night. He had been so confident about the arrest that he hadn't paid much attention to the exact amount. "I don't recall the exact weight. In your report, you wrote that you found approximately 2 grams of white powder, but only 0.8 grams made it to the lab. Can you explain what happened to the other 1.2 grams? The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected anyone to compare his report to the lab results. Most defense attorneys never dug that deep into the paperwork. "Some of the substance was used for the field test," Marcus said. "That would account for the difference." "Detective Sullivan, are you familiar with the standard procedures for field testing suspected narcotics?" "Of course. And how much of the substance is typically used for a field test?" Marcus realized he was in trouble. He had never paid much attention to the exact amounts involved in field tests. He just knew that you put a small sample in the test kit and waited for the color change. "A small amount," he said vaguely. "According to the manufacturer's instructions for the test kit you used, the recommended sample size is 0.1 grams. That would leave 1.1 grams unaccounted for." Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead. The courtroom seemed hotter than it had been a few minutes ago. He looked at Mike Thompson, hoping for an objection, but the prosecutor was studying his own notes with a worried expression. The older black man in the back row was still taking notes, and his expression had changed from skeptical to openly disapproving. Marcus felt judged by this stranger, and he didn't like it. Who was this man to question his methods? What gave him the right to sit there and act like he understood police work better than someone with 15 years of experience? "Detective Sullivan," Sarah said, "can you explain what happened to the missing cocaine?" Marcus looked around the courtroom. All eyes were on him. Jerome's mother was crying softly. The community members were whispering among themselves. Judge Williams was watching him with a neutral but attentive expression. But it was the older man in the back who really bothered Marcus. The man's disapproving stare felt like an accusation. Marcus had spent his entire career being respected, being trusted, being believed without question. He wasn't used to being doubted, especially by someone who probably had never walked a beat or made an arrest in his life. The frustration of being questioned so thoroughly, combined with the uncomfortable feeling of having his authority challenged, finally got to Marcus. He felt his 15 years of unchallenged power slipping away, and he didn't know how to handle it. Looking directly at the older man, Marcus raised his voice slightly. "Look, I don't expect everyone in here to understand police procedure. Some people just don't have the education or background to grasp how these things work." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. The entire courtroom went dead silent. Even Sarah Chen stopped writing and looked up in shock. The older man stood up slowly, his dignity intact despite the insult. Judge Williams stared at Marcus with barely controlled fury. Jerome's family looked stunned. The community members began, whispering urgently among themselves. Marcus realized immediately that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The words were out there, and there was no taking them back. The silence in the courtroom felt like a heavy weight pressing down on everyone. Marcus sat frozen in the witness chair, finally understanding the full impact of what he had just said. His face had gone pale, and sweat was now visible on his forehead. The confident detective who had entered the courtroom an hour ago was gone. replaced by a man who looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Patricia Williams slowly removed her glasses and placed them on the bench in front of her. Her dark eyes burned with controlled anger as she stared at Marcus. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but filled with authority that made everyone in the courtroom lean forward to listen. "Detective Sullivan," she said, each word carefully measured, "did you just make a comment about the education and background of people in my courtroom?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat felt dry as sandpaper. He looked around desperately, hoping to find some escape from the hole he had dug for himself, but every face in the courtroom was staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. I didn't mean," Marcus stammered. "Answer the question, Detective," Judge Williams said firmly. "Did you or did you not make a comment questioning the education and background of someone in this courtroom?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor, but I didn't mean it the way it sounded." The older black man who had been insulted remained standing. He was tall and distinguished, with the bearing of someone who had spent years in positions of authority. Despite being publicly humiliated, he maintained his composure with a dignity that made Marcus's behavior look even worse by comparison. Judge Williams looked toward the back of the courtroom. "Sir, would you please identify yourself for the record?" The man walked slowly down the center aisle of the courtroom. His footsteps echoed in the silence. When he reached the front, he turned to face Judge Williams. "Your Honor, my name is Henry Thompson. I am a retired federal judge from this district. I came here today to observe these proceedings due to concerns raised by community members about patterns in local law enforcement." The impact of this revelation hit the courtroom like a second bomb. Marcus felt his stomach drop to his feet. He had just insulted a federal judge who was there specifically to investigate problems with police conduct. Marcus's hands began to shake. Sarah Chen, who had been silent since Marcus's outburst, was now scribbling furiously in her notebook. Mike Thompson, the prosecutor, looked like he wanted to crawl under his table. The community members in the gallery began whispering more loudly, and several people pulled out their cell phones. Judge Williams called for order. "This court will take a 15-minute recess. Detective Sullivan, you will remain in the witness chair. Everyone else, please step outside while I confer with the attorneys." The gallery emptied quickly, with people eager to discuss what they had just witnessed. Marcus watched them go, knowing that word of his mistake would spread through Millbrook like wildfire. In a town of 12,000 people, news traveled fast, especially news this shocking. Judge Thompson approached the bench along with Sarah Chen and Mike Thompson. They spoke in hushed tones for several minutes. Marcus couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Judge Williams nodding grimly. Sarah Chen was pointing to documents in her file. Mike Thompson was shaking his head and looking defeated. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Williams returned to the bench. The attorneys took their seats and the gallery was allowed back in. The courtroom was even more crowded now, as word had apparently spread to people in the hallway. "This court is back in session," Judge Williams announced. "Before we continue with this case, I want to address what just occurred. Detective Sullivan, your comment was not only inappropriate but raises serious questions about your fitness to serve as a law enforcement officer." Marcus tried to speak. "Your Honor, I apologize. I was frustrated and I spoke without thinking." Detective Sullivan, in 15 years of police work, have you ever received training on cultural sensitivity or appropriate courtroom behavior? "Yes, Your Honor." "And did that training cover making assumptions about people based on their race or appearance?" Marcus knew he was trapped. "Yes, Your Honor." "Yet you chose to ignore that training today." It wasn't really a question, so Marcus said, "Nothing," Judge Williams continued. "I am ordering a full investigation into your conduct, both in this case and in your previous arrests. I am also referring this matter to the State Police Oversight Board for review." Sarah Chen stood up. "Your Honor, in light of this incident, and the serious questions raised about Detective Sullivan's testimony, the defense moves to dismiss all charges against my client." Judge Williams looked at Mike Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, what is the state's position?" The prosecutor stood slowly. Marcus could see that Mike was angry, but not at the judge or the defense attorney. Mike was angry at him. 15 years of friendship and professional partnership had just been destroyed by 30 seconds of stupidity. "Your Honor," Mike said, reluctantly, "given the circumstances and the questions raised about the evidence, the state cannot proceed with confidence in this case. We do not oppose the motion to dismiss." "Very well. All charges against Jerome Washington are hereby dismissed. Mr. Washington, you are free to go." Jerome's family erupted in quiet celebration. His mother hugged him tightly while tears streamed down her face. His sister patted his back. The community members who had come to support him smiled and nodded approvingly. But Marcus barely noticed the celebration. He was focused on the fact that his perfect record had just been broken. For the first time in 15 years, he had lost a case. And he had lost it in the worst possible way. Judge Williams wasn't finished. "Detective Sullivan, you are hereby ordered to appear before this court next Friday at 9 a.m. for a hearing on your conduct. The court will also be requesting your personnel file and records of all cases you have handled in the past 5 years." Sarah Chen gathered her papers. "Your Honor, I will be filing a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding Detective Sullivan's pattern of questionable arrests and testimony." Marcus felt his world collapsing around him. His perfect record was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His career was in serious jeopardy. And it had all happened because he couldn't control his temper for 30 seconds. As people began filing, out of the courtroom, Marcus saw Judge Thompson approaching him. The older man stopped a few feet away and looked at Marcus with a mixture of disappointment and pity. "Detective Sullivan," Judge Thompson said quietly, "in 40 years of legal practice, I have seen many good police officers do excellent work. I have also seen officers who forgot that their job is to serve and protect all citizens, regardless of race or background. I hope you will use this experience to reflect on which type of officer you want to be." With that, Judge Thompson turned and walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the witness chair. The courtroom was almost empty now. Even Mike Thompson had left without saying goodbye. Marcus finally stood up on shaky legs. His uniform, which had felt like armor when he put it on that morning, now felt like a costume that no longer fit. He walked slowly toward the exit, knowing that his life as he had known it was over. Outside the courthouse, Marcus could see small groups of people talking and pointing at him. Some were shaking their heads in disgust. Others were pulling out their phones to record him as he walked to his patrol car. Marcus got in his car and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. An hour ago, he had been Detective Marcus Sullivan, the cop who never lost a case. Now he was just Marcus Sullivan, the officer who had insulted a federal judge and lost the respect of his entire community. He started the engine and drove slowly back to the police station, knowing that the worst was yet to come. Marcus drove back to the police station in complete silence. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Every traffic light seemed to take forever. Every intersection felt like another chance for people to stare at him through his patrol car windows. He kept his eyes straight ahead, but he could feel the weight of judgment following him wherever he went. When Marcus finally reached the station, he sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before getting out of his car. He knew that as soon as he walked through those doors, everything would change. The respect he had enjoyed for 15 years would be gone. The fear and admiration in people's eyes would be replaced by something much worse: pity and disgust. The front desk sergeant barely looked up when Marcus entered. That was unusual. Normally, people acknowledged him when he walked by. Now it felt like he was invisible, or worse, like people were trying to avoid looking at him at all. Marcus made it to his desk without speaking to anyone. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his computer screen. The words on the monitor blurred together. He couldn't focus on anything except the memory of Judge Thompson standing up in that courtroom, dignified and professional despite being publicly insulted. His phone rang. Marcus looked at the caller ID and saw that it was his wife, Linda. She taught 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary School and usually called him during her lunch break. Marcus hesitated before answering. He knew the news would reach her eventually, but he wasn't ready to explain what had happened. "Hello?" Marcus said quietly. "Marcus?" I just got a call from Nancy Rodriguez. She said something happened in court today. She said people are talking about you all over town. What's going on? Nancy Rodriguez was the wife of Marcus's captain. If she was already hearing rumors, that meant the story was spreading faster than Marcus had feared. Linda, I made a mistake today. A big mistake. What kind of mistake? Marcus, you're scaring me. Marcus closed his eyes. I said something I shouldn't have said in court. Something inappropriate. What did you say? Marcus couldn't bring himself to repeat his exact words. I made a comment about someone's education and background. It came out wrong. It sounded racist. Diaz. Silence on the other end of the phone lasted for what felt like forever. Marcus, Linda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tell me you didn't really say something racist in open court. I didn't mean it that way, but that's how it sounded. Oh my God, Marcus, do you know what this means? Do you know what this will do to our family? Before Marcus could answer, Captain Rodriguez appeared at his desk. The captain's face was grim, and he was holding a folder in his hands. Linda, I have to go. We'll talk when I get home. Marcus hung up the phone and looked at his boss. Captain, Rodriguez had been his friend for over a decade. They had gone fishing together. Their families had shared barbecues. But the man standing in front of Marcus's desk didn't look like a friend. He looked like a police captain who had a very unpleasant job to do. Sullivan, we need to talk. Now. Marcus followed Captain Rodriguez to his office. The captain closed the door and gestured for Marcus to sit down. The folder went on the desk between them. I've already had 3 phone calls about what happened in court today, Captain Rodriguez said. One from Judge Williams, one from the mayor, and one from a reporter at Channel 7 News. Do you want to tell me your side of the story? Marcus tried to explain what had happened, but even as he talked, he could hear how weak his excuses sounded. He had been frustrated. He had been caught off guard by the defense attorney's questions. He had lost his temper. None of it sounded like good enough reasons for what he had done. Captain Rodriguez listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the captain opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Sullivan, I've been reviewing your recent cases while you were in court. I found some interesting patterns. In the last 2 years, 80% of your arrests have been of Black or Hispanic suspects. That's way higher than the demographic makeup of our town. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. He had never thought about his arrests in those terms. I also found that you've had an unusual number of cases where evidence went missing or where your reports contained inconsistencies. The Jerome Washington case isn't the first time a defense attorney has questioned your methods. Captain Rodriguez pulled out another document. This is a formal complaint filed by Judge Thompson this afternoon. He's requesting a full investigation into your conduct not just today but throughout your entire career. Captain, I've been a good cop for 15 years. One mistake shouldn't destroy everything I've built. One mistake? Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. Marcus, you insulted a federal judge in open court. You made what sounds like a racist comment in front of a room full of witnesses. And now we're finding out that this might be part of a larger pattern of misconduct. The captain stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the parking lot for a moment before turning back to Marcus. I'm suspending you without pay, effective immediately. You'll surrender your badge and weapon now. The state police will be conducting an independent investigation into all of your cases from the past 5 years. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Captain, please. Let me explain. Let me fix this. There's nothing to fix, Marcus. You crossed a line today that you can't uncross. Marcus removed his badge from his uniform shirt. The metal felt heavier than usual as he placed it on the captain's desk. His service weapon followed. 15 years of police work, reduced to 2 pieces of equipment on a wooden desk. Marcus, Captain Rodriguez said more gently, I'm disappointed. Not just as your boss, but as your friend. I thought I knew you better than this. That night, Marcus sat in his living room while Linda packed suitcases upstairs. She had decided to take their 2 children and stay with her sister in another state until things calmed down. She couldn't handle the looks from other parents at school, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The kids are asking questions I can't answer, Linda had said. I need time to think about our marriage and our future." The local news had picked up the story. Marcus watched himself on television, walking out of the courthouse looking defeated and ashamed. The reporter called it a shocking display of racial insensitivity from a veteran police officer. The story would run again at 11 o'clock. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's life completely fell apart. The state investigation found evidence of misconduct in dozens of cases. People who had been afraid to complain about Marcus before now came forward with their stories. The mayor, who had once considered Marcus a valuable asset, publicly condemned his actions and called for police reform. Jerome Washington, the man whose case had started it all, gave an interview to the local newspaper. He didn't gloat or celebrate Marcus's downfall. Instead, he spoke about forgiveness and the importance of holding everyone accountable for their actions, regardless of their position in society. Judge Thompson, despite being publicly insulted, issued a statement that focused not on personal grievances but on the need for systemic change in law enforcement. His grace and dignity in the face of Marcus's behavior made the contrast between them even more stark. In the end, Marcus pleaded guilty to evidence tampering and perjury charges. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and banned from ever working in law enforcement again. The man who had once believed himself untouchable learned that everyone, including those who enforce the law, must answer for their actions. Marcus lost his job, his family, his reputation, and his freedom, all because he couldn't control his temper and his prejudices for 30 seconds in a courtroom. The fall from grace was complete, and there was no way back to the life he had once known.